WQEE 99.1 FM The Key, Newman, Sharpsburg, Franklin, LaGrange. The views and opinions of this show and program are not the views and opinions of this station, its management, or its clientele. It's now time for the House of Light presents The Wisdom Cafe, each and every week at this time on 99.1 FM WQEE. Here's this week's special.
Hello and welcome to the Everything Considered podcast with me, April. I'm here once again with my friend Sandra Lee. Welcome back, Sandra.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. You and I have so much fun when we get to talk.
We do. We have a good time. Sandra is a life opportunity catalyst, and previously we have discussed human design, tuning forks, how to deal with difficult, stressful times. But today we're going to talk about food, because that's an important part of our life. I mean, most of us eat 3 times a day, maybe more, and it's something we have to do to live. When I was a little girl, Sandra, I used to see my mom eat these special little bars. They were called diet bars, and I wasn't supposed to touch them. They were just for her. And one day she went to work or went to go do something, and I was in the house by myself, and I thought, I want to have one of those yummy little bars, those diet bars. And I peeled open the wrapper and I took a bite, and it was like eating cardboard. It was the most awful thing ever. And I thought to myself, if this is what it means to eat healthy, I don't know that I want to do this, and then it really impacted me in the rest of my life, because I really had this opinion or thought or conditioning around food, that food could not be both good tasting and healthy. And I think this is one of the most confusing topics for most people, because we grow up, being conditioned around food. What's healthy? Women in particular, we spend a good deal of our lives going on incredible amount of diets, and we end up with all kinds of problems as a result. But I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, that food should be both enjoyable and good for us. Yeah.
I am totally for that.
Yeah. So you do these little programs on Sundays called Sundays with Sandra. And I saw this last week that you were making eggs Benedict. And it looks so good. And I want to hear more about your philosophy around food.
Food is so complicated. Mm-hmm. And you tell a story about your childhood. Food is also very emotional.
Yeah.
There is so much tied into food. Think about being a little baby, and your survival is dependent on that mother, those parents, giving you food so that you can survive, and giving you love so you can survive.
Yes.
And food and love get inextricably stuck together forever.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's survival that's connected to it.
Yes.
And so thinking about all of this impact that food has on us and how I feel about myself, about my life, about the people in my life. And of course, it's critical. I don't live, you don't live without food.
Right.
So, and we don't really talk about all of these connections, all of these complexities, all of those, foundational childhood experiences like you shared, that forever changed your perception of food, of health, and of yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And to have those, I'm going to call it unfinished business, those loose ends that just kind of like tug at your energy, at your reality, at your awareness.
Right.
So, when you are thinking about food, buying food, preparing food, going to a restaurant to have food, eating food at somebody else's house, does that memory ever come up?
Yeah.
And it shapes how you choose to eat and how you feel about yourself with every bite that you take, potentially. There's that unfinished business that's dragging you down. And so allowing ourselves to heal that old trauma associated with food and consciously choose the perspective I want food to have for me. That's part of what the Sundays with Sandra is about. Part of it is a little bit of a teaching moment about perspectives about food. And then part of it is I make food and I record a video of me making food for Sundays with Sandra, and then I take a picture of the food. And like with the Eggs Benedict that we mentioned earlier, it's like, I want people to see that food is normal, it's healthy, it's fun, and that there can be variety, and that it doesn't have to be difficult.
Yeah.
Because some people who I've worked with in the past don't cook, don't know how to cook, don't have the dishes and, the equipment to cook, but they want to, but there's all these barriers in the way. And, family of origin experience of food is such a powerful shaper of this whole thing. And, we run along with habits, conditioning, patterns that I don't necessarily feel good about. And that all gets like mashed in there.
Yes.
And then, I had a client who kind of got lost. She knows that she eats more than she wants to when it comes to junk food. But she hadn't really, put together any information about why. When I don't have any information about why, it's impossible for me to make a different choice.
Right. So it's important to kind of look at some of those old patterns and see maybe what their genesis was. Where did that begin for me? I know for me, it was just this whole idea that, if you wanted to stay thin and pretty, you couldn't eat a lot and you had to eat cardboard. And then, we've gone through periods of beliefs about nutrition in our culture. I mean, there was the whole no fat period that we went through. I remember it in the 80s. I think it was 80s, maybe leaked into the 90s a little bit. Susan Powers had a whole book on the no fat diet. And, we have since learned that fat is important.
This is actually the center of what we are going to talk about. And I'm going to talk about this right now. Okay. So a couple of things. One is that we get conflicting messages about food.
Yes.
And it's confusing. The government, the healthcare system say, oh, we found out that in order to be healthy, you need to not eat this and to eat that. But then later, they flip it. I was like, oh, you know what? We said you weren't supposed to eat that. You're actually supposed to eat that. And this that we told you you're supposed to eat, oh, that's bad for you.
Right.
The biggest place where this happens is when it comes to fat. And that low fat, no fat message that you mentioned earlier. Let's talk about how this all came to be.
Okay.
In my opinion, I am most likely to make a change if I understand why. If I don't understand why, I'm like getting all thrown around by this message, that message, this message, that message. It tosses me all over the place. I think part of why the government and the medical system do this is to keep us afraid and imbalanced so that I give up my control.
Right. I would agree.
Of my health, of what I eat, so that I don't have power. So understanding why these things are all out there and what's actually going on in the body. I'm big into science personally.
Mm-hmm.
So helps me to make a decision that makes sense for me and kind of not pay attention to those external messages so much.
Mm-hmm.
I get the external message and then I look at, does that make sense to me? And then in human design, I'm designed to make gut decisions, splenic authority. So it's like, what feels right to me? From a human design perspective, other people might have other ways. Some people might have to think about it. Some people go with the emotional waves. That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But to take the information in and then whatever way you have of deciding what's actually right for me is good. I encourage people to investigate, to get some information. So let's talk about what happened in this whole fat in your diet history. So in the 50s, these messages, these studies started coming out that said fat is bad. Fat causes cardiovascular disease. You need to stop eating fat. You need to stop eating saturated fat in particular. And you need to stop eating cholesterol because all of those clog your arteries and give you cardiovascular disease. So that was all based on studies and papers and things that were done back in the 50s. One of these studies that, it always just kind of blows me away. That's the basis, part of the basis of this diet heart hypothesis is what they called it, was a study they did on rabbits. And they fed rabbits cholesterol and then noticed that they started having cardiovascular disease.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, when you eat cholesterol, it gives you cardiovascular disease. What they didn't pay any attention to is rabbits are vegetarian.
Right.
Rabbits don't eat cholesterol.
Correct.
So if you give these rabbits cholesterol-filled food, understandably, it's going to make them sick.
Right.
I don't think, April, that you are a rabbit. I know I'm not a rabbit.
Very different physiology.
Yes, absolutely. So and this whole not supposed to eat cholesterol thing led into not supposed to eat saturated fat thing and the whole low fat diet piece. This whole message that when you eat fat, it makes you fat, it on one level kind of makes logical sense, but that doesn't mean it's actually accurate.
Right. Right.
When you eat fat, your body does not necessarily store it as fat. And it doesn't necessarily put fat into your arteries to cause heart disease.
Okay.
What contributes to the buildup of plaque, fatty plaque in the arteries, is actually inflammation. What is inflammation? Inflammation is your body's natural response to stress, to injury, and to sickness. So anytime I get a cut, for example, I get a cut on my arm, my body has to use inflammation to bring supplies to that area to repair, and then to clean that damage up after it's repaired and to heal this up. If I breathe in toxic car exhaust, right, that's something toxic in my body, and my body says, oh, we have to go take care of that, and inflammation comes, gets that toxin, pulls it out, and then has that go away.
Okay.
If I eat something that is bad for me and I have a reaction in my stomach, my intestines, there's inflammation there, and then cleans it up, and then it goes away. So the inflammatory response is natural and important for health.
Right.
What I don't want is I don't want to have inflammation all of the time. If I eat a lot of food that has toxins or too much sugar in it, or all, sorts of different things that are not beneficial for my health, then I will have a background level of inflammation all of the time.
Wow.
So if I eat a candy bar, for example, full of sugar, that sugar alone is going to cause an increase in inflammation throughout my whole body.
Right. Right.
So let's talk about what happens when there's inflammation. So imagine this is a blood vessel and there's a bend in the blood vessel.
Right.
And we have these all throughout the body, right? But, arteries have to go all over the place, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine this is an artery and this is a bend in the artery.
Mm-hmm.
And blood comes through here and it bumps into the wall. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
So the blood is like pushing on that one same place over and over and over again. That causes a stress in that artery wall right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if I continually hit something, there's a possibility I'm going to get a little micro tear in the wall of the artery. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
Yes.
That pressure.
Now, if I have inflammation, that means I have fluid that is outside of the blood vessels. Mm-hmm. That's what inflammation is, right?
Right.
If this is a capillaries are the smallest arteries, okay? And blood comes through here and fluid comes out of the blood vessel into the tissue. And when it's stuck out there, that's inflammation.
Right. Right.
Okay? So if in the area of this bend in the artery, there's a lot of inflammation in the area, it's more likely that when this blood hits there all the time, I'm going to get a little micro tear because it's all swollen, right? It's damaged already.
Yes.
So it's more likely to get those tears.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a blood vessel and I get a little micro tear, the body has to repair that, right?
Right, right.
What the body uses as a patch is cholesterol.
Yes. Wow.
So the body takes cholesterol molecules and calcium and puts a patch on that little hole.
Right.
That's how you get the cholesterol in the wall of the artery.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have so much inflammation systemically that these repeated strikes cause damage to the artery that has to be patched.
Right, right.
It doesn't get into the wall of the artery just because I've eaten cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the message, right?
Yeah.
There's cholesterol in the walls of the artery clogging the artery. We need to stop eating cholesterol.
Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, but we can see how they come to that conclusion.
Sure.
They say, you've got cholesterol in there. It must be because you ate it.
Right.
It's not taking account of the fact that this is the body doing what it's supposed to do.
Right. The body's smart.
Damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit more about cholesterol. Again, they started making these recommendations to, not eat cholesterol, not eat saturated fat, and not eat fat in general. Mm-hmm. Okay? So what does the body use fat and cholesterol for?
Well, I know that fat's important for brain function and hormone function. And then, like you just said, the cholesterol is reparative. I think it's important to have a certain amount of cholesterol.
Yes. So let's talk about cholesterol alone.
Okay.
Your body needs more cholesterol than it's possible for you to eat. It is not possible to eat enough cholesterol for all of your body's needs. Because why? Okay. Let's talk about your brain. Okay. Your brain has a lot of fat in your brain. Mm-hmm. A tremendous amount of fat in your brain. And every cell in your body has a cell wall. You've heard about cell walls. The cell wall is made of fat.
Yes.
Made of all these little fatty molecules that make up this double layer of fat for every single cell in your body.
Right.
If I eat good fat, then that fat's going to go into the walls of my cells. Mm-hmm. And all of the cells of my brain, there's a huge amount of fat in the brain.
Right.
You call yourself a fat head. That's actually a compliment.
I love it.
If you don't eat enough fat, your body doesn't have enough fat for all of your cells and for your brain to function.
Yes.
Plus, your body, a significant part of what your body wants to use as fuel for energy is actually fat.
Okay. Yeah.
So your body needs all of this fat. Okay. So it's the cell walls. Okay. Plus you need cholesterol in the cell wall.
Mm-hmm.
If you have just the long chain fats that are in the cell wall, they would be a little too stiff. The cell wall needs to be flexible. It needs to move. There's proteins in there that move around.
Mm-hmm.
Cholesterol is in the cell wall. Lots of cholesterol is in the cell wall to help this cell wall be able to be flexible and to move and to function.
Mm-hmm.
So you need cholesterol for your cell walls, and a huge amount of cholesterol is in your brain.
Wow.
Plus, cholesterol is the molecule that your body uses to make all of your hormones.
Right.
Your hormones start with a cholesterol molecule and gets turned into all of these other things.
Mm-hmm.
So when you don't get enough cholesterol, your body doesn't have enough cholesterol for all of these things.
Mm.
It's unfortunately really common for doctors to give people who have high cholesterol statins.
Yes.
What does a statin do? Statin makes it so your body cannot make cholesterol.
Right.
And it deprives your body of the cholesterol that it really needs for all of these functions, which means that I believe taking a statin contributed to my mother-in-law's dementia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sandra, I saw a lot of clients over the years that this was so common, and I'm not sure if there's any studies done on it, but a lot of my clients that were put on statins with it, they would have terrible leg pain. Their legs would be, that was the number one complaint of all my clients that had been taking a statin was, like terrible pain at night in their legs. And the tissue was completely taut and tight. It was like no blood flow was getting there. And I didn't know how that connected, but I knew it did just from observation that seemed to be what always occurred. They'd go on the statins. The next thing I would know, the complaints would be, you've got to do something with my legs because they hurt all the time. And that's, I'm sure, and then if the brain needs that cholesterol and you're depriving it, how much more? So yeah, I do wonder if this is a causative factor in some of the things people are experiencing, especially people of a certain age that are typically put on these drugs.
Yeah. So yes, there are a lot of side effects that go along with the statins. I'm not sure exactly what it is about the statin that causes the muscle issues specifically, but I know it's very common.
Right.
It could be some other part of it. Another result of statin working the way it's supposed to is you don't have enough coenzyme Q10.
Right.
The mechanism of stopping the cholesterol also stops the production, the availability of coenzyme Q10. Okay. And coenzyme Q10 is needed by everything. And primarily your heart has the highest amount of coenzyme Q10. And so, when people are taking statins, if they decide they want to still take statins, it's really important to also supplement with coenzyme Q10.
I can see
because to make up for that deficiency. Let's talk more about cholesterol. Eggs are high in cholesterol. And in this time where it was recommended to not have cholesterol and not have saturated fat, they were telling people not to eat eggs.
Right.
And I read a book by a man named Uffe Ravenscoff, and I will always remember this. I think the book was The Cholesterol Myth. Didn't look that up, but I'm not positive. But I think it was The Cholesterol Myth. And he was a physician, I think, and he did a study himself about eggs. He was able to measure his own cholesterol, and so he measured his cholesterol before the study, and then for 8 days in a row, he had, I'm not sure if the numbers, I should have looked this up. He had 8 eggs a day.
Wow.
For like 2 weeks or whatever it was. And he measured his cholesterol every day while he was eating 8 eggs a day. Because theoretically, if eating eggs raises your cholesterol, this would cause a big increase in his cholesterol numbers. There was no effect on the cholesterol from eating 8 eggs a day. I don't imagine how hard it would be to be able to eat 8 eggs a day, but he did it for the purposes of the study. And his cholesterol went all over the place, totally unrelated to the eggs.
Right.
Because the body makes cholesterol when it needs cholesterol.
Right. It's like the Band-Aid that it sends out to make repair.
Is the biggest. I got so much information in here.
You do. I'm impressed. I love this because you're putting into words something that is a philosophy that I'm really coming to accept in my own life, and really starting to make some good choices about how I choose to feed my body and my soul. So you've really given us a lot to consider. Now on Sundays you do Sundays with Sandra, and you share videos where you're cooking something. I caught the one on the French onion soup that was pretty yummy, and then the one last week was the eggs Benedict. But you have all sorts of them, so they can find you on Facebook. You're doing those, right? And she is a life opportunity catalyst, and she's amazing about changing the way your beliefs or helping you to alter what you believe, and ultimately how you express those things in the world. Just a very impactful person, and so grateful to have you on today, Sandra. And are there any other places where they can find you?
Miracleinspirations.com is my website.
Okay.
It's not as up to date as I would like it to be, but it is there. I have a newsletter that people can get, and I have a special offer coming up, a package of healing sessions that's going to be at a special savings. So there's all kinds of things available. So Sandra at miracleinspirations.com. They can email me, and miracleinspirations.com is the website.
Fabulous. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on, Sandra. And please reach out to her if you'd like to just learn more about her and what she offers, and check out Sundays with Sandra. You won't regret it. It's wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you
so much, Sandra, for coming on today. I'm so happy to catch you. Take care now. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you next time.
You've been listening to the House of Light presents The Wisdom Cafe on 99.1 FM WQEE. The House of Light, a wellness center at 29 Jackson Street here in Newnan, is a place for people to relax and find true healing. For additional information, 407-414-6711. Remember to tune in next week for another healing message from the House of Light presents The Wisdom Cafe right here on 99.1 FM WQEE.